Shabbat Shalom. I would imagine that most of you have heard of the story of Jacob wrestling with the man at the Jabbok River at the place that is called Peniel. And it's quite interesting. Today we actually are quite confident that the place is what is today known as Talul ad-Dahab in Jordan. And the reason is because the Bible speaks of Peniel becoming an actual city in the time of Gideon, and then also that Jeroboam did retainment walls, or he fortified it during his lifetime, and they found this very thing. So it's quite exciting. But many do not realize the sheer importance of the site and how the biblical text zeroes in on the mystery of the one that Jacob wrestles with. And it's written in such a way that should have left generations sincerely asking, who is this man? And the more you investigate, you're tempted to say, is this the God of Israel? And the book of Genesis describes this man as this person as a man. But yet we also get the sense that this is no ordinary person, because Jacob holds on to him, begging that he would bless him. And this enigmatic figure grows as he asks for his name, and he isn't given more details. And so usually this just becomes a mystical encounter with a whole lot of guesswork that comes from Jewish and Christian sources. I think it was Maimonides that said that this was a prophetic, he saw this as a prophetic vision. Another Jewish opinion was this was the guardian angel of Esau. And Christians have also battled with who this one is. And it's quite interesting because it's almost a metaphor of those who are of Israel and of the commonwealth of Israel. We wrestle with trying to understand who this one is and his identity. And and few realize that there's actually a passage in Scripture that deals with this period, this incident, and it's just 3-4 verses, and yet it's kind of hidden in the midst of the prophets, and it's fundamental to unlocking the person. So through the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, I believe the prophet Navi Hosea, he would be given extra insight into the one that Jacob wrestled with on that little hill of Peniel. And so in Hosea chapter 12 and verse 2 we read, Yehovah also has a quarrel with Judah and will punish Jacob according to his ways. He will repay him according to his deeds. He took his brother by the heel in the womb, and by his strength he contended with God. Yes, he contended with the angel and overcame. He wept and pleaded to him. He found him at Bethel, and he spoke with us there. Even Yehovah, God of hosts, Yehovah is his memorial name. And so Hosea draws out 4 really important details concerning the one that Jacob wrestled with. And we begin to see that the prophet wanted us to know that this was certainly no ordinary person. The first detail that sticks out to me and needs a bit of explaining is that he described this one as an angel. That was in verse 4, that Jacob strove with the angel and prevailed. So the one called a man in Genesis is an angel, or malach in Hebrew. And this is a being that is to be understood as of God or from the Father. A malach is better translated as a messenger or an agent. And actually priests and prophets were called malachim in the scriptures. And believers may be quite surprised to know that Jesus, Yeshua, is called a malach in the book of Malachi. He quoted a scripture that would link himself to the one whom Malachi called the messenger of the covenant, or the angel of the covenant. And bear this in mind, because the one that Jacob wrestled with appears to be of heavenly origins. In Genesis, it says that when this being simply touched Jacob's thigh, that this messenger dislodged the hollow in Jacob's hip. And this one's heavenly origins are also highlighted in the Genesis text, where after the long night where he'd been wrestling, and as the light began to dawn, he begins to cling on to him and say, to bless him. And yet, this is not like a father would bless his children, because Jacob would later in his life refer to this one and invoke a great blessing on Joseph and his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, as if this was a true guardian angel that he understood over him. So in Genesis chapter 48 and verse 15, we read, "And he blessed Joseph and said, the God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who fed me since I was born until today, the messenger that redeemed me from every evil, may he bless the youths, and may my name be called on them, and the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth." And so what we know from the description of this encounter in Genesis is that Jacob wrestled, that the one Jacob wrestled with, he recognized him at dawn as the light was increasing, and he stopped fighting, but he clung on to him to bless him. And this brings up an interesting thing in the text, is that it seems as though Jacob knew this one from a previous time. So where is this, we may ask? Well, it's a few chapters earlier in Genesis, when Jacob was in his father-in-law's house, Laban, and there with his wives, he had this dream where he spoke of where this angel had appeared to him, and took credit for being the one that had got Jacob from using a rock as a pillow to having wives, handmaids, and many sons and a daughter, many flocks and herds. And so we read about this in Genesis chapter 31, and from verse 11. "And the messenger of Elohim spoke to me in a dream, Jacob. And I said, I am here. And he said, lift up your eyes and see all the rams leaping on the flocks. They are striped, speckled, and spotted. For I have seen all that Laban does to you." So this one watched over Jacob and informed Jacob that he had prospered him in the land of Padan Aram in Syria. And this makes sense as to why Jacob would hold on to him to continue to bless him, not just in the land of his exile, but as he was coming back into the land, approaching it from Peniel, that he would bless him in the land of his inheritance. But Hosea makes a statement that would even increase this one's mystery even further. You may remember, if we go back to Hosea chapter 12, Hosea says, "And by strength he, Jacob, had power with God." Now, many commentators who hold to an absolute oneness in the God of Israel, and that God is just the Father, they will say that this statement is not about Hosea speaking of the angel being in any way likened to God, but that in a general sense, that Jacob had power with God. Yet the plain reading reads as if Hosea was trying to say that this messenger is, by mystery, one with the Father. And this is echoed in the Genesis text of this encounter, because after wrestling with this person, Jacob calls the very place Peniel, which means face of God. He said in Genesis chapter 32, and in verse 30, "And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, because I saw Elohim face to face, and my life is delivered." So not only that, but a couple of verses earlier, the Malach himself, he says to Jacob, in the light of him having just wrestled with him, he says in verse 28, "And he said, your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men and have prevailed. So, now some Jewish scholars will emphasize that regular angels, human judges, and other important people could be known as gods, Elohim in Hebrew. But even the translators, they don't translate Genesis here as Jacob saying, I have seen a God face to face, or that the messenger was saying that he had wrestled, or he had power with a God and with men. The text really reads as if he wrestled with God and looked upon the face of God. Now it's here that we, in Messianic faith, we have a fundamental difference with mainstream Jewish faith in terms of how we perceive the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Judaism believes in a God who has no image, and believers claim that there is an image of the invisible God, and this is whom we call the Son of God. Sons imaging their fathers, it's an idea that actually comes from the Torah of Moses. You can go to Genesis chapter 5, and you'll see there that Adam has a son called Seth, and Seth is described as, in relation to Adam, in his own likeness and after his image. I think it's Genesis 5, verse 3. A son of God, or one who manifests as Israel's God, is something Judaism says is unbiblical, and a later pagan idea that never was a thing in ancient Israel. Yet we cannot help but wonder from Hosea whether there was an ancient understanding of a begotten being from the Father representing the face of God, the image of God, or the likeness of Israel's Elohim. Outside of the Gospels and other Messianic writings, these are interesting texts of the Tanakh that would push us to not just consider God in human form, that we can't just say this is some later Catholic Greco-Roman idea. These ideas cannot be so simply dismissed as flowing from the non-covenanted Goyim and heathens twisting scriptures because of an insatiable desire for images and idols. And that this idea simply comes from other religious systems that used to believe in Herculean-type demigods, and that these pagan roots have caused Christians to make Jesus into one of these God-men. Hosea makes a third point in chapter 12 that encourages us to view Jehovah, who is invisible and dwells at unapproachable light, as one who appears in the Tanakh in a begotten image of his son. Hosea would say that even prior to Jacob's dream in Laban's house, that Jacob had known this one even earlier in his life. Hosea said, verse 14, I believe, he said that he wept and he made supplication, and that he found him in Bethel. In Bethel. Hosea would encourage all of us to understand that Jacob's first encounter with this mystery man was not in Peniel, and not even Padan Aram, but at Bethel, where he dreamt of Jehovah standing, as someone looked upon, standing at the top of a staircase. And the Genesis account, it reads in this way. If you go to Genesis chapter 28, and we can read from verse 12. And he dreamed, and behold, a staircase was placed on the earth, its top reaching to the heavens, and behold, the messengers of God were going up and down on it, and behold, Yehovah stood above it and said, I am Jehovah, the God of your father Abraham, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you are lying I will give to you and to your seed. We're actually told in the Genesis account to believe that Jehovah standing here is to be believed to be the messenger, because 3 chapters later, if we go back to in Laban's house, Jacob would, if we read the full description of that dream, Jacob actually says that it was the messenger says to Jacob, I am the God of Bethel, where you set up that pillar to me. We can read that in Genesis 31, and we'll start from verse 11. And the messenger of Elohim spoke to me in a dream, Jacob, and I said, I am here. And he said, lift up your eyes and see all the rams leaping on the flocks. They are striped, speckled, and spotted. For I've seen all that Laban is doing to you. This is the important verse. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed the pillar, where you vowed a vow to me. Now rise up and go out of this land and go back to the land of your kindred. So here we see the Malach himself saying to Jacob, this is that he was the one that he saw, and so we can understand why many believers in Yeshua, when we read these words of the Tanakh, we begin to wonder, is this Messiah here? The text pushes the reader to view this one as no mere messenger, but a unique agent that is from the Father, and by mystery, he's a part of the one Jehovah God. And I use the word mystery because it is an enigma. It's a relationship we can't necessarily fully understand, and yet the one on the top of the ladder said, I am Jehovah, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. And the end conclusion of all of this is him being a part of the mystery of the I am. And this would seem to be the exact final conclusion or thought of Hosea that he stresses in just those few verses there in Hosea 12, that this is the conclusion of the matter. And so back in Hosea 12, let's read the full part. Well, let me read verse 4, connecting this all together. Yes, he contended with the messenger and overcame, and wept and pleaded with him. He found him at Bethel. Now, some translations say he found us at Bethel, but the Hebrew there does say he found him at Bethel. And he spoke from us there. Even Jehovah, the God of hosts, Jehovah is his memorial. Now, it's that last description of Hosea there that jumps out to me. Jehovah is his memorial. Because without many realizing this, Hosea connects a few scenes from the Torah, and he's connecting not just Peniel with Bethel, but another important encounter where the Malach urged Moses that although he is clearly from the Father, Jehovah is his memorial to all generations. And so the biblical world, we typically understand that the God of Israel appeared to Moses at the burning bush. I don't think anyone queries that. And yet, if you read carefully from Exodus chapter 3, you will see that the description of the one in the bush was this malach. It was this messenger. And when you go through this messenger who could speak as God and appear as Yehovah, we get a very interesting passage where he urges Moses to understand who he is. And so that is in Exodus chapter 3 and verse 15. And God said to Moses again, you shall say this to the sons of Israel, Yehovah, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is how I should be remembered from generation to generation. So fascinating passage this. And there's no greater struggle within the broader people of God than our attempts to understand this one and how the God of Israel works. Believers in their minds will frequently point to our Jewish brothers, and we will speak of them and their failure to identify the Messiah and their denial of there being an image of the invisible God, or that Israel's God could manifest. And for certain, us as believers, we must maintain that because we believe there is one. But if we believe this to be the Messiah, I'm reminded of a passage in Isaiah that the prophet Isaiah spoke of concerning the one who Jacob wrestled with, because he said that he would not just be a stumbling block to the Jewish nation, but to both houses of Israel. And I really see this most evident in the season we're coming into now, where we are heading into what is, for much of those who claim to be Israel, from the nations, a season that they would relate to being about Messiah's nativity. And at this time, I'm reminded of how believers see Messiah, or in my opinion, how I think they don't see him. And in my heart, I feel like many wrestle with him unknowingly, that they think they're doing God a favor and doing a good work, when in fact, they're doing the opposite. Let's take the tradition of December 25th and the core idea of this having something to do with Messiah's advent and his coming. And something many years ago I would have fought tooth and nail for. Now, Constantine the Great, the man who established the Holy Roman Empire, he was known to be a worshipper of the Syrian sun god Sol Invictus. He belonged to a cult that was first promoted under Roman ruler Elagabalus, and he had very little success. But 50 years later, on December 25th, the Roman Emperor Aurelian, he re-established the cult of Sol Invictus, but he made it an official religion. And now the question is, why December 25th? Well, thanks to those who work in antiquities and preserve ancient artifacts, we have what's called a Philocalian calendar of AD 354, I believe. But anyway, this is 30 years after the establishing of the Holy Roman Church. And even during that time, we can read of them keeping a birthday to the unconquerable Son on the 25th of December. That's in part 6, I believe. And then if you go to part 8, it also mentions of Jesus, and it states that Jesus, he had his birthday 8 days before the calends of January, which, surprise, surprise, is December 25th. Now, either this is one of the greatest coincidences of history, or what seems more plausible, I'm sure you'll agree, is that the worship of the God of Israel was twisted and molded into the worship system that was dedicated to Sol Invictus, the birthday of the Syrian form of Mithra. And so they changed from his birthday to the celebration of the one whom Jacob wrestled with. So when people talk about, let's put Christ back into Christmas, or hey, we've got to remember the reason for the season, I think of myself how I used to be passionate and wrestle with these things. But I'm also reminded of how Paul warned us. He said, just be careful of which Messiah you receive, that there are many Jesuses. And I don't claim to fully see him, but there needs to be a humility. And that some of the things we fight for, we may be ignorant, and we may strive to maintain these things, and we may actually find that we're fighting with the one who was willing to give his life for us. And I personally do not believe that we can distance the one that Jacob wrestled with from the God of Israel. He gave the 10 Commandments from Mount Sinai and the law of Moses as his ways for how we should live. It's the God of Israel's law, and according to Genesis and Hosea, the Messiah is one with the God of Israel. The one who wrestled with Jacob is Echad, one with the God of Israel, and not some God from Syria, if you get what I'm saying. Our forefather Jacob's encounter with the man of mystery is a humbling metaphor. This is not just ancient history, but it's a theme that lives on till today. Something's not fully seen. Our God said that he would hide his face from us, and there would be blindness of sight, and there would be dullness of ear to understand Israel's King Messiah. For this reason, we cannot afford to be like the Pharisees of old, who they came to see in an arrogant kind of way. We can all stumble in this regard. As Paul said, we all look through a glass dimly. We believe in the Father and the Son, and yet we will wrestle with how we must still maintain that there is one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God of Israel. I believe the lesson is this: keep wrestling. And when you find Messiah, the God of Israel, don't let him go. Shabbat Shalom.